Welcome back. You're with Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. We talk nothing but Las Vegas Raiders football. Mo Moton, Scott Gulbranson back with you here on our Thursday edition as we get closer to the Raiders getting back on the field this Sunday, coming off the bye week as well. Do us a favor, if you don't already subscribe to the podcast, we need you to do that. Please do that. Wherever you get your podcast, you can find us. It doesn't matter if you're on an Android phone or an iPhone. You listen to Apple Podcasts, you listen to Google Podcasts, you listen to Spotify. You're at home cooking eggs for breakfast and you want to hear Mo opine about the offensive line. Just say, hey, Alexa, play Mo Moton avocado smoothie. No, play Silver and Black today, and we'll pop on there. So we appreciate you doing that. Mo Moton is a national NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. He's also the Raiders columnist at sportsnot.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Mo Moton. I am at LV Gully. And Mo, we're going to jump right into the latest news. Of course, the guys got back to practice yesterday on Wednesday in Henderson in Las Vegas, and some surprises, not so surprising surprises, pop up as the field rolled out onto practice. Guess who wasn't there? Darren Waller was a DNP, as you read it off the report to me just before we went on the air, with a hamstring. That hamstring that kept him out of the Kansas City game, that put him in street clothes after 5 snaps. He is not back at practice on Wednesday. We defended him for being down at the baseball game and bringing the Padres some luck in that series, that is. And now he's still out. How concerned should Raider Nation be? They're going to go ape. They already are. I've already seen it in the cesspool that is Twitter. I've seen it other places. I've heard it on talk shows. Mo, Darren Waller is teetering in a place that I don't think any player wants them to be, let alone the coach and the front office of the Raiders.
If you're healthy enough to attend a baseball game with your reported girlfriend, you should be healthy enough to practice. No excuses. No, I'm kidding. I mean, honestly speaking, I kind of thought that Darren Waller would miss the first day of practice. Usually that first day of practice, if you're an injured player, it's usually kind of a sit-out day if you have an injury. Some players get veterans rest. That wasn't the case with Darren Waller. He does have a hamstring injury. As you know, he didn't play in most of that Chiefs game. But Josh McDaniels did say that he was optimistic or hopeful that both Darren Waller and Foster Moreau will return this week. But he did say that wasn't a prediction. So he's hopeful. Yep. But the good news on the flip side of this is that Foster Moreau did play. So if Darren Waller cannot, Foster Moreau is certainly capable of filling that starting tight end role.
Yeah, get one of those guys back. I mean, they need them. They ran out of tight ends against the Kansas City Chiefs. But yeah, I think this clearly is going to stoke the fires of those who are not happy with Darren Waller. And to your point, coming back, remember, they had the week off last week. They get in on a Wednesday yesterday to start practicing. And with a hamstring, that muscle in particular, when you're trying to come back from that, you have to be very careful, right? Because you don't want to re-aggravate it and make it worse. Because when you do that, it actually just extends the time to which it bothers you. And so you have to be really careful. And as we mentioned, as they were signing him to a big contract extension, Mo, he's not exactly 24 years old, right? I mean, I know 6 years doesn't seem like that much, but he's over 30, and age factors in. Recovery time just takes longer.
One of my Twitter followers is going to make fun of me for saying this, but Raiders fans aren't going to want to hear this, but...
Yeah, that's right. I love that little meme he put out with the Grecian statue. It was awesome.
Uh-huh. Because I usually say that when I'm going to say something that Raiders fans aren't going to want to hear. But Raiders fans aren't going to want to hear this. But they need to be patient with Darren Waller simply because look at Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen hurt his hamstring in the season opener against the Raiders. He tried to come back early. He re-aggravated that injury, and they had to hold him out for a couple more weeks. Now he's trying to work his way back to get on the field week 7. But as you said, those hamstring injuries, you have to be very, very careful with them because you can re-aggravate them, and then it can get a lot longer. So I know Raider fans are going to roll their eyes about this, but considering he has a legit injury, you want him for the long haul, not just for a game against the Texans. No offense against the Texans, but you want him for the length of the season, and you have a capable backup.
Right. And the Raiders need to win the game. There's no question. Can they roll with Foster Moreau if he's 100%? Yes. There hasn't been any roster moves from them to grab another tight end, which tells you that they think he's got a good shot of coming back, as Josh McDaniels talked about on Wednesday. Didn't predict it, but said that, he felt good about it. And I think you watched that waiver wire. Now, they might have brought some guys in. We didn't hear any reports about that yet. So we'll see how that all breaks out. Good news on the injury front, though, Mo, was Anthony Averett back at practice, as was wide receiver DJ Turner, who, frankly, I forgot about until I saw that he was back off the injury report. But getting Averett back, especially with what's happened with Nate Hobbs going on IR for the next 4 games, that's a big one. Josh McDaniels likes him. They brought him in because of his veteran leadership, because of how he played in Baltimore. Talk about that. If you're that defensive coaching staff, you're Patrick Graham's staff, feeling about, wow, you get this guy back. And it's a break-in game a little bit, right? Because we talked about the Texans should not beat the Raiders. Should not. I say should not. And so the Raiders have an opportunity to get healthy, get things on track against this team, and that goes for Anthony Averett in the backfield too.
Right. If you remember back in the summer, I was probably Anthony Averett's number 1 fan at the time. I remember talking a lot about him, saying that I thought that he would actually surpass Rocky Sin for the starting spot. Now, Anthony Averett broke his thumb in that first game, so he didn't have a chance to showcase what he's got on the field. But I think him coming back is huge, especially with Nate Hobbs going on IR with broken bones in his hand. You're going to need Anthony Averett unless you're going out to get another cornerback from another team. Of course, the trade deadline is not that far away, but Tavon Campbell's not going to step in and be your starter right away. I know the Raiders signed him, but as you said, they brought in Anthony Averett as an early signing for a reason. They obviously believe he can take on a big role. His first year as a starter with the Baltimore Ravens played very well. I believe he led the Ravens in interceptions with 3 last year, had double-digit pass breakups. So here's a guy that you can plug in immediately, and he can give you a lot of snaps. So it's a huge boost for the Raiders defense.
No question on that one, my friend. You look at the rest of this team, too, from a health perspective. Everything looks pretty good on offense. We saw Derek Carr on, I think it's his nephew's podcast, having some fun talking about people were mad about that, too, because you just lost to the Chiefs and you're having a good time and laughing on a podcast when you should be home flogging yourself and crying in your beer or whatever you drink. So, but clearly this team has had a good week off to decompress and to come back to work now on yesterday, on Wednesday, and refocus. When you look at what they have to put together, and your column that you wrote up on SportsNot, and talked about the Raiders coming off and what they needed to do adjust. Talk a little bit about that and what you're going to be looking for when this team hits the field Sunday to see if they are indeed making those adjustments and changes which can lead to second half success.
One of the main things they're going to be looking at, and you joked about it earlier in the show, is the offensive line. I've said that you need the best 5 guys. And obviously Josh McDaniels doesn't agree with me because he's been playing the best 7 guys. And he's been rotating at right tackle. He's been moving guys around at guard. And I said in the column that if you want the best 5 guys to play at their optimal levels, you need some continuity, because offensive line arguably is the position that you need the most chemistry. You want 5 guys all on the same page. It's hard to get 2-3 guys on the same page on the field at the same time, let alone 5. So I think with that, you need some continuity. Settle on your best 5 and come out with that against the Houston Texans and basically run with that throughout the remainder of the season, barring any injuries. I actually think, as you pull it up, that Darren Waller Jr. is going to play right tackle from start to finish against the Texans. I believe the Raiders have been kind of transitioning him to be that guy. And I think Jermaine Illuminati, being a journeyman, a backup for most of his career, is going to cycle out over to right guard. Now, I think he can move inside because he does have experience there. He started there actually against the Tennessee Titans in week 3. So this wouldn't be a new position for Jermaine Illuminati to move one spot over inside to the guard spot. So those are the 2 changes I see on the offensive line. Thayer Munford playing full games as a full-time starter at right tackle. Jermaine Illuminati moving inside the guard. Now, as you see up there, I have Amir Abdullah. Not a big part of the offense by any means, because Josh Jacobs is the guy and he has the hot hand right now. But I would like to see Amir Abdullah get more opportunities because, again, we know Josh Jacobs' history of getting banged up, getting nicked up. I know he's playing at a high level, so you don't want to take him off the field, but you got to give him somewhat of a breather. because you don't want to wear him down too much, because if he goes down, then your running back room takes a big hit, because Zamir White hasn't got a lot of touches this year. So you want to make sure you pace Josh Jacobs, get Amir Abdullah out in the flat, get him some targets. I think he can help that Raiders offense just give a different wrinkle to the system, gives defenses and defenders something else to consider. We talked about Anthony Averett. I think he could step in right away whenever he's ready. I know they opened the window for him to return. He was a full go at practice. Right away, he can step in and be your boundary corner. So I think that would be an important addition if he's able to play. Cleveland Ferrell. A lot of people have talked about Cleveland Ferrell the past few days because he's been the subject of trade rumors. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said that the Raiders have been looking to shed or not get rid of, but looking to move Cleveland Ferrell and Jonathan Abram. I actually think Jonathan Abram has more value because he's been on the field a lot more. Whereas Cleveland Ferrell, after his rookie year, he has seen a diminished role. Every year he's taken fewer and fewer snaps. But I think in his limited role, he's actually played well. And we talked about this multiple times on the show. When you put him on the field, especially moving inside, he could generate some pressure and help Max Crosby and Chandler Jones because they need a complement on the inside. Now, whether or not they trade him, I think is irrelevant to the fact that they need to play him a little bit more because the Raiders do need some help on the interior of the defensive line. So he'll either generate enough trade value to get us a good deal, or he'll be able to help your defense, which is struggling right now.
Yeah, we talked about that on Tuesday's show, right? We talked about Cleve Farrell and that whole defensive front actually being more aggressive, a lot more movement we saw against the Chiefs, which was incredibly encouraging, and that was in relation to the ends too. Max Crosby continues to do what he does, but we saw Chandler Jones, especially in that first half, really have a good half. Back to the Abdullah point you made in the piece up on Sportsnot on Tuesday or Wednesday, excuse me, is that running back room. We've talked about this a couple of times over the last week, I think, but that running room, that James White role that we heard about him playing, that use of multiple back sets that we saw in New England from Josh McDaniels, it just hasn't happened. Could we deduce that they'll go to that a little more, especially because Josh Jacobs is having a fine season, having a great season now that they're using him properly. But at the same time, he's broken down every season he's played for the Raiders and in the NFL. So you want to be able to spell him a little bit. Do you think we'll see that starting this week in Houston?
I think our buddy, one of our emailers, Gary Harkenreader, brought this up with two running back sets.
Yes.
And I think the answer is yes. Simply because you're not going to give Josh Jacobs 300 touches. That's just never been the formula for him. Even going back to Alabama, he's always been kind of not in a committee, but he's always shared touches with another back that's going to take some of the load off of him. So I think as the season goes on, as we get into the midpoint of the season, you're going to start to see more Zamir White, maybe Amir Abdullah. So far, it's been Brandon Bolden in that pass catch role. Brandon Bolden has 8 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. Amir Abdullah has 1 catch for 23 yards. I would think that the younger running back, Amir Abdullah is 29, Brandon Bolden is 32, is only 3 years, but I would think that the younger running back who supposedly has more juice would get more targets. So I'm interested to see if they mix him in a little bit more and, of course, spell Josh Jacobs with Zamir White because, as we've said all along, the Raiders have a talented running back room. Now, I will say Josh McDaniels just started to involve his running game to the satisfaction of a lot of people who felt that he was underutilizing Josh Jacobs even. So
yeah,
he has just started getting on the bandwagon with Josh Jacobs. Maybe he starts mixing it in with the backups a little bit after the bye.
Yeah, and I think too with the situation at tight end where you don't know on Darren Waller, even if Darren Waller comes back, is he 100%? If Foster Moreau comes back, is he 100%? I think you got to start leaning on those backs to be pass catchers, which is part of the point you made in the Abdullah portion of your column. And to me, that's a great opportunity as well. Obviously, the opportunity for Carr to throw the ball out quickly to a back coming out of the backfield on some of those routes gives them the time, also makes up for the deficiency on the offensive line, right? That's one of the ways you can scheme for that. So I certainly hope that they look at doing that against Houston this week. All right, we're up against our first break. By the way, let me run down Coming up in the next segment, we'll have a special guest, Sam Gordon, who covers the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, will be our guest. We're going to talk about his column this week, which some people have not talked about, and I'm shocked by it because it's the only column I've read coming out of Las Vegas that's pretty critical of Josh McDaniels. So we're going to talk to him about that and what he had to say. And then in the third segment, we will talk about the Houston Texans and what the Raiders need to do to come out of that at 2 and 4. He is Mo Moten. I am Scott Gulbranson. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, Silver and Black Today. Whether you're listening to us on 98.5 The Fan in Las Vegas or on our Odyssey original podcast, thanks for being back with us as well. We have a special guest coming up. Joining Mo and I here is Las Vegas Review-Journal writer Sam Gordon, and Sam covers the Raiders, and he's out there most days, as well as doing some other stuff there, including My Old World of Boxing, which I know you cover as well, and other things. So, Sam, thanks for joining us here on Silver and Black Today.
I appreciate you guys having me. How's everything going?
It's going good, man. You know, I mean, I think Raider Nation would feel a lot better if they were 4-1, and that's why we want to talk to you about your column, because I was, Mo and I have talked about Josh McDaniels and the team he inherited and kind of expectations. Look, going into the season, the expectations for this team were much higher. You're coming off a playoff run. I don't care how you got in the playoffs. You got in the playoffs. They do the coaching change. They have additions on defense. They have Devontae Adams on offense, Chandler Jones on defense. You sign guys to long-term deals. You're in a win-now mode. Josh McDaniels comes out. They start 1-4, and your piece, which I'm going to show up on the screen here too in just a second, talks about it and says, hey, there's no time for a honeymoon for Josh McDaniels. And one of the things you talk about is, 4-5 games, the team has held the lead and given it back, right? It's not performed well. It has not finished well. But in writing this and talking about this lack of a honeymoon, talk about the expectations and talk about the mood there too. When you're in the building out in Henderson and you're around this team, do you get a sense that there's any pressure and that McDaniels understands that there is no honeymoon?
Yeah, great question. I think when the coaching change happened, right, there was one of two ways coaching and general manager changes happened. There was one of two ways that this team could have gone. They could have looked at it as a hard reset, going to rebuild, trade away best players, really start over, draft a quarterback or prepare to draft a quarterback next year, et cetera, and do that. Obviously, with the 10-7 season last year and taking the Cincinnati Bengals, a couple plays away from potentially beating them on the road. That's not the route I would have gone. I thought I didn't have a problem with being aggressive and going out and trading for Devontae Adams and signing Chandler Jones. It makes sense. I mean, you were 10-7. You're a playoff team with the roster you had last season. It's understandable why, if your ownership, if your management, you think you're close and you want to push some chips in. But with that said, that creates these expectations, right? And that the expectations were, given that this was a playoff team last year, when you add a perennial first-team All-Pro wide receiver, arguably the best in the game, when you add a perennial Pro Bowl pass rusher, that signals that you're not just trying to make the playoffs, like you're trying to go on a deeper run. What that means, I'm not sure, right? But that clearly there was some dissatisfaction in going 10-7 and losing in the first round. With that said, right, from a talent perspective, what we've seen the first 5 games, like that's not the problem. The Raiders are right there from a talent perspective. But situational football has plagued this team all year. Struggles in the red zone on both ends, right? Defensively, offensively. That's situational football, right? Penalties, untimely penalties. They're one of the most penalized teams in the league. It feels like that's a conversation we have about the Raiders every single year. There was a lot of discourse in training camp where guys are running laps and, kind of the discipline that they were imposing on themselves. Hey, we're going to be a more disciplined football team. That hasn't happened, right? Like that just hasn't happened. So in kind of the finer points, they haven't executed. And as a result, they've blown leads. They've blown a couple huge leads. They haven't really figured out how to play with one. And you're 1-4 when you could easily be, pick your record, right? I mean, you could say 5-0, you could say 4-1, 3-2, whatever. Anything's better than 1-4, except 0-5, of course. So with that being said, right? Yeah, I think there's definitely some frustration. I think there's definitely some disappointment. You saw, I think Devontae Adams kind of epitomized how frustrated this team was on Monday Night Football, right?
Oh yeah.
This is a team that didn't expect to be 1-4. I don't think they expected to be 5-0, but the expectation wasn't 1-4. Now, with that said, I just got back from practice today. I was out at the facility today, Wednesday, first day back from the bye in terms of a full practice and whatnot. And there did seem to be some enthusiasm, some optimism, right? Because even though this thing is been underwhelming so far for this franchise, there is a stretch, there is a runway here where, look, now you can get some of those wins back. And, it would have been nice to bank a few early for the Raiders so that this stretch isn't so pressure-packed. But this is a situation that they're in, and the schedule's favorable, and now you have an opportunity to see if you can put some things together. We'll see. There certainly wasn't – nobody was in their feelings. Nobody's down about this whole thing yet. But there's definitely an understanding that, look, if they don't pile up some wins quickly, this thing can go a lot more south than it already has.
Piggybacking off your piece on the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the honeymoon is definitely over on this show because we look like idiots. We were singing the praises of Josh McDaniels. Oh, he's going to have these guys disciplined. They're running laps. They're really going to finally cut down penalties. As you said, penalties has been a big issue for the Raiders for years, and we finally thought it was going to change. Hasn't happened yet in the regular season. But I wanted to ask you, you're closer than us to the Raiders right now and the players. What have the players said about this slow start? Are they pointing to certain things that they need to do better? Are there certain things that you keyed on that maybe they need to do a lot better? Because I'm hearing a lot of people talk about practice and details, and I feel like if practice and details are a little off, that's something that you can nip in the bud right away. What have you been hearing?
Yeah, similar discourse, right? Just about being a little bit more refined in practice, about being more consistent in those kinds of settings. I think there was obviously some chance to reflect over the course of the bye, right? And I think some of the talking points that emerged today were just some of the things we already talked about. Red zone execution on both ends, cleaning up penalties, and then the return game, right? Getting, battle of field position. So many times the Raiders, have to go a really long way or they're setting themselves back with field position and whatnot. So, yeah, I think those are things that you feel like they are fixable at this point in the season. But not without a sense of urgency, not without, it sounds so cliche, but not without being more refined in practice, not without being a little bit more detail-oriented, because the areas in which they're struggling, that's what it's about. It's detail-oriented stuff. I mean, I think this team went up 17-0 on the road at Kansas City. They scored more points against the Chiefs than Buffalo did. I mean, the talent is there. We've seen that. And I think the credit of the coaching staff, there's more balance on offense. They've been taking care of the football, right? Josh Jacobs is playing the best football of his career. You're starting to get Devontae Adams really going. So there have been some positives, but without the kind of the finer points, the detailed stuff, it doesn't really matter, what you do during the first 2 quarters if you can't put away a lead. So, I think those are, talking points you've been hearing have certainly been some of the talking points out here. But yeah, there still remains a lot of optimism. I think it's worth noting, right? The AFC West just isn't, I think we all kind of thought this would be such a great division. Like, obviously that's not the case. Kansas City is still really good. We know that, but the Chargers could easily be, be 2-4, or, they haven't looked impressive at all. And Denver's a dumpster fire. So there are opportunities because the division isn't necessarily what they thought it would be, what we thought it would be. There are going to be opportunities, but yeah, it's going to start with refining some of the things that they've struggled with, and until Sunday, we don't know if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, we talked about actually on yesterday's show, Sam, about that very subject, about how just everyone was talking about the AFC West being the best conference in the last 25 years, best division in the last 25 years, and it's completely disappointed except for the Chiefs, who actually people were down on the Chiefs, thinking, well, geez, they might be unseeded finally, and there they stand at the top of the division still. A couple of things too from your column that really stuck out at me, and I'm big on this in general, and we've talked about it on the show too, which is this idea of excuses. So the Raiders sit dead last in red zone offense still, correct? And you mentioned a quote in there from a press conference last week from Derek Carr, where he talks about, hey, it takes time for us to get on the same page. And, we hear this all the time. We hear a lot of fans, because we do a lot of interaction with fans in Raider Nation, Sam, and they are, well, he needs time. But then you look at Brian Daboll in New York, you look at Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. What are they doing, and how can they click so quickly and the Raiders don't? So that idea, and you underscore this throughout the column, right? No excuses. Do you feel sometimes like we do that there are maybe not overt excuses made, but you certainly, like you see in Carr's comments, some around the way kind of excuses on why they're not performing?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think it fits. It creates kind of an easy talking point. It's an easy narrative. Yeah, it's going to take some time, and I get that, right? I'm sure there's elements of that are true. Like nobody they're not where they want to be in week 7. I buy that, but neither is any other team. Like, you can still win games while you continue to figure out your identity. I think when you take a look at Minnesota, right, one of the big things they're one of the least penalized teams in the league. The offense might not be what we thought it was going to be with Kevin O'Connell coming over from the Rams, might not quite be that explosive, but Kirk Cousins is playing with a lot of confidence. Justin Jefferson's been awesome, and situationally, they've won a bunch of games, close games late, because they are good at situational football and they're not beating themselves with penalties and turnovers, right? In New York, you have a coaching staff with, I would say from a roster construction standpoint, not as good of a team as the Raiders, right? Like, just personnel-wise, they don't have quite the same firepower. They have leaned into their strengths. Hey, Daniel Jones does this really well. Saquon Barkley does this really well. We are going to lean into this, and then be really good situationally. Again, the Giants are thriving situationally. They're good in the red zone on both ends. They're able to finish drives. They're able to, hold teams to field goals when they absolutely have to. And there's a real swagger and presence that they are playing with. For whatever reason, again, that just hasn't happened with the Raiders. So it's not against the rules to get a new coach and be really good right away. Like, every single year, a couple of times. It just hasn't clicked here. Again, certain things have. The running game's clicked. Devontae Adams is getting open, and you're figuring out how to get him going down the field. I think Max Crosby's having, a defensive player of the year caliber season. He's been super disruptive, but it's just defensively they haven't put it together. Clearly one of the worst defenses in the league up to this point, and then situationally they're just not any good. So yeah, it's going to take some time to get where you want to be, but every team in the NFL can say that, and it's okay to win games while you're still acclimating your coaching staff. It's okay to be good situationally, even though you have a new coach. It's okay to not commit penalties, and they just haven't been able to get out of their own way in that regard.
So, Sam, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but it sounds like to me you're saying the Raiders have underachieved despite all the coach regime shift. With all the name brand players they had, they should be better. Is that correct? Am I?
Yeah.
Right?
No question about it. No question about it. Certainly at this point, right? Like, the best 1-4 team in the league, they're better than their record. Yeah, sure, but that you don't get anything for that. You don't get a trophy for being better than your record. I think a lot of teams at this point probably contend that they're better than their record, not just this year, but every single season. So yeah, at this point, they've underachieved. Now, with that being said, again, there is going to be a stretch here where they're going to be expected. I think they should be expected, both internally and externally, to rattle off a few wins here. And then maybe you get back to 500, and given all the parity in the NFL, not just in the AFC West, but around the NFL this year, maybe you're back in that playoff conversation by the end of November. I think that certainly needs to be the goal. I think that's certainly the approach that the Raiders want to take, and with the sense of urgency. And I think that, again, given the schedule, and I kind of talked about that in the column a little bit, who they're playing, you have a real chance here to kind of make up some of those wins that you didn't get at the front end of the season. The unfortunate part is they were right there in all those games. All 4 of those losses, they were right there. There are opportunities to win. You can bank up wins, give yourself a little margin of error, because we know how it goes, right? Like, upsets have been happening all the time this year. Tampa Bay just got beat by the Steelers. The Jets just went into Lambeau and pounded the Packers. Like, yeah, it looks like the Raiders should rattle off a bunch of these games, but who's to say? We don't know. There's been so much parity. It's been really hard to kind of peg where they should be at. I just know from a talent perspective, from what I've seen, they should be better than 1-4. They've definitely underachieved.
Yep.
Real quick warning, lightning rod question coming up here. Speaking of underachievers, Darren Waller has been a big subject on this show. Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow, both not themselves, not the guys who we've accustomed to them to be as playmakers, but a lot more angst towards Darren Waller, even though they've both been in and out of lineup, both been hurt. But a lot of people are questioning Darren Waller's commitment to the game. Now, you're closer than us. Are you seeing anything that indicates that Darren Waller is not all the way dialed in at practice or at meetings? Because a lot of people are asking, is Darren Waller all in, and they're attaching it to some relations off the field and saying he's not the same guy. So could you please put those rumors and that buzz to bed, please?
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, right? I think he had a hamstring injury in training camp, and he didn't practice a ton, and I think there was kind of some speculation. And I even thought, hey, maybe, is this a negotiating tactic? Like, yeah, it's fair to wonder, kind of given the situation. But it's also, look, he had a hamstring injury. He didn't practice. That's what the team said. That's what he consistently maintained. And then he injures his hamstring against the Chiefs, and has, probably, given that he missed most of camp, might be behind from a conditioning standpoint. He didn't get the reps that some of the other guys got in the offense. So yeah, I think it's clear. There's reasons why he's fallen behind the eight ball. Now, of course, he's been a little bit more visible publicly here, and that's going to naturally lend itself to those kind of questions. Is he not allowed to enjoy his life off the football field? Like,
apparently not, Sam.
No.
No. I think he's allowed to have a life. I don't have any issues with that. I don't think that necessarily reflects, poorly on his commitment. I think this is a guy that we've seen put up, 1,000-yard tight end, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, Pro Bowler, and when he's healthy and right, one of the most unique skill position players in the league just because of his size and speed and what he can, pose for defenses. Now, Raider fans, they haven't seen that. We haven't seen that at all at any point this season. That doesn't mean it's not there. I think the focus for the Raiders needs to be on getting him right. You still have enough offense. I think what are they, 6th or 7th in points scored? They're still averaging like 25 points per game, right? They're still up there. You still have enough offense without a healthy Darren Waller. The focus should be on getting him right and then seeing what he can do. There's no doubt the season's been absolutely disappointing from his standpoint. There's no question about that. But I don't think it has anything to do with his commitment to football. I think this is a guy that's proven what he can do. And sometimes, for whatever reason, players are banged up. They don't get on track. He's not the first guy to go through this. And there's still plenty of time to get it turned around. But getting him healthy has to be a priority, because if this team wants to maximize its potential, he, of course, is going to be a huge part of that.
But Sam, don't you know that the pitchfork mob on Twitter believes Kelsey Plum is evil and has corrupted Darren Waller? I mean, how could you not think that? It's crazy that and Mo and I on this show, Sam, always say, okay, what do you do as a job? You might be a janitor, a truck driver, a doctor. Do you not have a life outside your job? So we've been defending him on that point, saying, hey, the guy is having his life. He deserves his life, especially that guy who went through so much and really appreciates life a lot more than some do. So we defend him on that one for sure. But Sam, listen, we appreciate your work. We enjoy reading it. You can follow Sam on Twitter @BySamGordon. We will also put as well his column linked in the description on the podcast and on the YouTube page as well. Sam, we appreciate you, man. We'll talk to you down the road.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate you having me on the show. Talk soon.
All right, man. Thanks very much.
All right, appreciate it.
All right. There you go. Sam Gordon from the Las Vegas Review-Journal was our guest there. Great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we continue. We'll take a look at Sunday's game against the Texans. We'll give you a preview from David Stepanian and get on with the rest of the show. You're listening to Silver and Black today here on 98.5 The Fan, also on an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere, Raider Nation. Welcome back, Silver and Black today, the home stretch. Thanks again to Sam Gordon from the Las Vegas Review-Journal for joining us. Interesting conversation on that one, Mo. It's something we had talked about. And again, it's not about being overly negative. It's just about a coach inheriting a team that went to the playoffs. You have other coaches in first year. The scheme excuse, as we talked about with Sam, it just doesn't work anymore. You can't say that. Look at Brian Dable, right? Look at Minnesota, the examples we talked about with Sam. Those are examples. Look, it's a win-now game.
Especially when you have some recognizable name players like Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams, Derek Carr, who we've argued back and forth about, depending on what section of Twitter you're in and whether he's, is it his last year? Is he, worth keeping? And do we move on? As Sam Gordon's titled in his column, the honeymoon's over. Got to win some football games.
You do. You have to win some football games. And speaking of winning football games, Mo, coming up on Sunday, the Raiders host the Houston Texans. The Dallas Texans are now the Kansas City Chiefs. The Houston Texans, and in a game that looks favorable for this team to get healthy and to get back on the winning track. But you look at it, the Raiders' keys to victory, I think, are the keys to victory they've had all season long, which is let's play 4 quarters of football. This offense, not knowing what pieces are going to be ready for Sunday, the defense with some of the injuries there, getting Anthony Averett back, losing Nate Hobbs, seeing better play from the defensive line. 2 things you need to see, Mo, to say, hey, this team is going to come out of the game at Allegiant Stadium at a 2-4.
I need to see what I saw going into the bye was a lot of Josh Jacobs. I believe the Houston Texans have allowed the 3rd most rushing yards league-wide. Continue to feed Josh Jacobs and those running backs and attack the Texans' defensive front because they're actually pretty decent at defending pass. I know they give up a lot of yards, but they drafted Stingley at the top of the draft. I believe he was the 3rd overall pick. Petrie is their safeties, opportunistic type of ball hawking safety could be one. But I would just run the ball against the Texans, force them to stop that. And if they can't stop it, just keep feeding Jacobs. The other thing you got to see is, and I just not to cut you off, but one of those cornerbacks opposite Rock Hudson has to step up. I know Brandon Cooks isn't putting up big numbers. Nico Collins, decent, but he hasn't found the end zone yet. You cannot allow Davis Mills to look like the next coming of Peyton Manning out there. You have to make sure that you win the game and you win it decisively. Now, people say a win is a win, but if you're going to go on a run, you have to beat the Texans, who are maybe one of the bottom 3 teams in the league, and you have to beat them decisively. If you want a legitimate shot, looking at it, saying, okay, we are a playoff caliber football team.
And you talked about using the run game. Do they go more heavily in that direction with this game, knowing who they're facing, holding back, or do you need to get into a rhythm? Like I believe you need to get in a rhythm on offense. You need to use the full complement, like you were playing the Chiefs again or whoever. You need to kind of see what you have, continue to build on this team, getting comfortable and understanding that scheme.
No, absolutely. There's no holding back. It's now or never. If you lose against the Texans, as I said on the previous show, you might as well start selling assets at 1-5 because that playoff berth is not going to happen at that point. So you empty the gamut and you go full throttle and throw the ball, run the ball, mix it up, balance. As I said before the bye, the Raiders were pretty balanced offense. Now still has some stretches where they stalled, didn't get a lot of possessions because the defense couldn't get off the field, but once you have those possessions, you got to make them count.
Is there anything about that Houston Texans team that concerns you when you look at the matchup with the Raiders, especially when you look at an offense in Houston which has not done a lot, but a Raiders defense which plays really well at times, but just can't play 4 quarters and remains inconsistent?
The Houston Texans, as I look at my notes, the Houston Texans are 10th in red zone offense. That worries me because that means that once they get inside the 20, they finish drives with touchdowns. They have an impressive 4th-round rookie running back and Damian Pierce, who I talked about on another show and maybe this show, that I think that he's going to be a playmaker, and he's been one. So once they get in, they make the most of their opportunities. The Raiders, one of the worst red zone defenses in the league in terms of allowing touchdowns. They have to fix it up. I believe Patrick Graham talked about it, and he looked over the first 5 games, and he's going to have to make some changes because the Texas team, don't take them. I know they won 3-1, but don't take them lightly. Yeah,
Raiders still near last or last in the league in red zone offense on the opposite side of that. And that exactly scared me too, because look, you get into the red zone and Lovie Smith's team is scoring points. It's why they roll into the game with a better record, right? And technically a better record than the Raiders. And so you look at the matchups, and that's what concerns me on the defense. But it also looks to me as an opportunity for this Raiders defense to say, okay, we know where they're going to be a challenge. Let's batten down the hatches. Let's prevent them from being successful in that red zone, gain some confidence. I think this team, no matter what they say at the press conferences, I think this team needs a win more than anything, just from a confidence perspective. They got to know all the hard work that they're putting in, coming off the bye, coming off a break. They need to know that what they're doing is working. They need to know their new leader, frankly, is guiding them in the right direction. Do you disagree?
I don't disagree. And I think it's now, of course, I feel like the defense more so than the offense. Now, the offense has its own problems with continuity and dry spells at certain points, but we expected the defense to be a lot better. I know they don't have a bunch of stars outside of Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, and that's why we've been campaigning for them to sign a guy like Ndamukong Suh and other guys during free agency. But we expected a lot better out of Patrick Graham because his red zone defense is a lot better with the Giants, and that hasn't translated. I know it's a different roster, different personnel, but if you're confident in the guys that you got, that you're not getting some of these names that we mentioned, something's happened where you're not coaching them up to the point. The guys are not executing. It's not translating. What I did hear, though, and I continuously hear this, and I don't know why this is, but he talked about practice. And that stands out to me because Derek Carr has talked about this. Oh, it has to translate from the practice field to the game. And I'm wondering what is going on at practice, or what is not going on at practice, that you guys aren't carrying it over to the actual football game. So that concerns me a little bit.
It does. It's interesting because, in talking with Sam earlier as well around some of the issues in Josh McDaniel and his style, it does seem odd that it keeps coming up, especially and I don't know is it guys, are they calling out players without calling them out, meaning they're not at the stage yet where they're going to name names, but they are sending a signal that, hey, you know who you are, you're not bringing it when you need to bring it. If that's the case, then sit them down. I mean, now if it's a big name, I understand that presents a big problem, but you got to do it at some point, right? There has to be accountability, and if the accountability doesn't equal playing time, what do you do?
I don't want to start any rumors on the show, but I would keep an eye on the inactive list before kickoffs. Who's a healthy scratch that normally isn't a healthy scratch? Maybe that player isn't with the program. Maybe that player didn't put enough in during the week of practice. Again, I'm not going to mention any names, but there have been some names that have been healthy scratches that, I mean, we know he's buried, but and I don't know what the case is with him. It may not be practice, just may be a poor fit for the coaching staff and their scheme. But I'm just saying, keep an eye on the healthy scratch list, keep an eye on the inactive list before these kickoffs, and I think you get a clue of who's not all the way dialed in.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Healthy scratches are always indicative of something, right? Whether if you're loaded at a position, you kind of understand it. If it's a younger guy or he's breaking in, but overall, you see some of the veterans, you see some of the names pop in, you're like, whoa. And that always comes up, obviously, Sunday before kickoff, and can be a surprise and light Twitter on fire as well. All right, Mo, we're getting close to the end of the show. Also want to make sure that we thank our listeners on 98.5 The Fan in Las Vegas who are listening to the show on Sunday morning, as well as the Bet 1140 for the Night Owls who are hearing us at 4 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Eastern time as they wait in line or get ready to put down their bets for this game and for other games as well. But Mo, I like the Raiders 30-20 in this game. I think they win by more than a touchdown, and I think the offense gets on track with Waller or without Waller, and I think that defense will give up points, but I think the offense has the opportunity to lead the way here as long as the defense can, keep the Texans in check at time. How do you see it netting out with this one?
I promise we didn't plan this, everyone. I dropped an article on Thursday, and I actually predicted that the Raiders would win 30-21.
Did you?
Yes, I did. So I'm right.
See, I haven't done my reading this morning yet.
I'm right with you, Scott. And my reasoning was, if you can put up 32 points against the Denver Broncos defense, and I know Raiders fans like to say the Denver Broncos defense is overrated, but Denver Broncos defense is pretty good. Let's be honest. It is. If you can put up 32 on that defense, you should be able to put up 30 or more on the Texans. And again, I think they should win handily. Now, win is the win, however you get it. The Raiders win by 1 point, win by 30. It still goes down as one win in the column, but I think they win. I think they win by 9 points and they take care of business at home.
There you go. We're only off by a point. All right, my partner, have a good weekend covering the games. You'll be back on Tuesday. We'll be back on Sunday following the game for our post-game reaction with Murph from Raiders Fan Radio. Make sure you follow Mo at MOEMOTON. That is a Bleacher Report as well, where you can read all his great stuff, including what he talked about just dropping this morning, and on sportsnot.com as well, where he's a Raider columnist. Mo, enjoy your weekend. We will talk to you again on Tuesday.
Absolutely. For Raiders / Knicks fans out there, this is not a Brooklyn Nets hat. I just want to make that clear. It's just a Brooklyn hat.
Just a Brooklyn hat.
Some people are Knicks fans like, whoa, is that Mo wearing a Brooklyn Nets hat? No, I did not switch over to the dark side. Knicks fan through and through. I'm just repping my borough. That's all.
There you go. Gotta love it. There you go. That is Mo Moton. All right, folks, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. For those listeners on the radio, thanks. We'll be back next weekend again at 9 a.m. on 98.5 The Fan and Odyssey Station. This is also an Odyssey original podcast. Thank you guys all. Thanks again to Sam Gordon from the Review Journal for joining us. And Raider Nation, take care of one another. Enjoy the game today. We'll talk to you later tonight or on Sunday night, depending where you're listening to us, after the game with Murph from Raiders Fan Radio. Take care, everybody.